Hi everyone and welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to tackle an unseen poem using my cheat sheet that you can download from the link in the description below. If you haven't seen the first video called How to Get Full Marks in Unseen Poetry, have a look at that one first, as this example will use some of the information from that video and it's a good place to start. So a quick recap of what we went through in the last video. The unseen is worth 20 marks and so you should spend around 20 minutes on it. It's the worst answered question on the paper, and because of that, it's a great opportunity for you to get full marks. It's worth 5% of your overall grade, and so a good answer to the unseen can make the difference and help you get the grade that you want. The poem that we're going to use as our unseen poem for this video is one by the Irish poet Cecil Day-Lewis called Walking Away. There's a link to the poem and questions in the description, and the most effective way to use this video is to first go through the poem yourself to see what you can make of it, what you can get out of it, and then watch the video to see how I apply the questions from that cheat sheet. So here is the cheat sheet, and remember, the idea behind this is to practice using it to get to the point where you don't need the sheet anymore, and the questions become just the natural ones that you ask when faced with any poem. Okay, so I'm first going to look at my poem, but also the questions. So, what do you learn about the relationships between parents and children in this poem? Explain your answer with reference to the poem. Identify two images that stand out to you in the poem and explain why with reference to the poem. Discuss how the poet conveys emotions and feelings through the language that he uses in the poem. Okay, so we've obviously got our two separate questions. You choose one, and let's go back and have a look at that poem. So I've read my questions and I've gotten a hint from the questions about the nature of the poem. So it's about a parent-child relationship. The title doesn't give me much more other than someone's leaving, someone's walking away. So I get the sense that this might not be a very happy or positive poem. Now, I could be wrong, but just first impressions, that's where I'm leading. Let's begin with the read-through to get a full appreciation of the poem, but particularly the sound of a poem. It is 18 years ago, almost to the day. A sunny day with leaves just turning, the touchline's new ruled. Since I watched you play your first game of football, then, like a satellite, wrenched from its orbit, go drifting away behind a scatter of boys. I can see you walking away from me towards the school with the pathos of a half-fledged thing set free into a wilderness, the gait of one who finds no path where the path should be. That hesitant figure, eddying away like a winged seed loosened from its parent stem, has something I never quite grasped to convey about nature's give and take, the small, the scorching ordeals which fire one's irresolute clay. I have had worse partings, but none that so gnaw at my mind still. Perhaps it is roughly saying what God alone could perfectly show. Our selfhood begins with the walking away and love is proved in the letting go. Okay, so remember, this poem is unseen. The examiners don't expect prior knowledge, and you are being rewarded here for your engagement with the poem. You don't need to identify everything, just enough to differentiate your answer from everyone else's. Also, once you become familiar with the questions, you don't need to approach them in any particular order. It's simply a toolkit that you can use as you see fit. We're looking at 20 minutes for this question, approximately 5 to 7 minutes going through the poem, finding material, and the rest writing up your answer, depending on how quickly you write, of course. So let's begin. The first thing that strikes me about this poem is its uniformity. It's 4 stanzas, and at first glance, they all appear to be the same number of lines, and the lines are roughly the same length. Now that alone is interesting because remember, everything the poet does is done consciously. It's an active choice from the poet to convey his message. Here, the even stanzas don't happen accidentally. A quick read through the poem also makes it clear that there's a rhyme scheme. Examining it a little bit more closely, we can see that in each stanza, the first, third, and fifth lines have end rhyme. So to name the rhyme scheme, we would call it a regular A-B, A-C-A rhyme scheme. So day, turning, play, satellite, away. So day, play, and away are A lines, and the other lines are B and C. In terms of the meaning or the story of the poem, it appears that a speaker is addressing his child. The poem opens with a statement of time. It's 18 years since the speaker watched their child, most likely a son, play their first game of football. It's obvious that the memory is a very powerful one for the speaker because of how clearly and vividly he remembers it. Not just remembering this event almost to the day, but the fact that it was autumn with the leaves just turning and the lines of the pitch freshly painted. The second stanza makes it clear that the boy, instead of going to his father after the game, goes off with the other boys. So we can see here, drifting away behind a scatter of boys. The third and fourth stanzas shift from a description of a specific memory to an exploration of the pain that the event caused him. So my initial suspicion here is that the pain he feels is not simply caused by his son not coming over to him after the match. It's probably much deeper or metaphorical than that. So on a surface level, the poem is addressed to a son from a father, and it focuses on a memory that that father has about when his child was young and metaphorically turned his back on his dad and went off with other boys instead. If I was trying to develop that idea, I would think about deeper themes and ideas about relationships between parents and children, and possibly the theme of growing up. I get the sense that the father feels a natural fear or concern that his son is growing up, but maybe that he's not ready for what comes with growing up. And what gives me this idea is the sequence of images that Day-Lewis uses. Probably the most noteworthy thing about this poem, after reading it a couple of times, is the strength of the images he uses. In the first stanza, he describes, using a simile, his son going away from him being like a satellite wrenched from its orbit. That verb wrenched, that's a really powerful one. It suggests it's not a natural process, and maybe even it's violent or a painful one. In the second stanza, Day-Lewis employs a metaphor to compare his son to a small bird. Even if you didn't know that half-fledged here means a bird that doesn't have its full wings yet, you could hazard a guess as it's only half ready. And then this underprepared bird, this half-fledged thing, is set free into a wilderness. It conveys the concern and worry of the father that his son is not yet ready to be away from his parents. The image in the third stanza is probably one of the most powerful in the poem. Another simile is used to compare the son walking away from the father to a seed falling from a tree. I think it's a sycamore tree here, the ones with those little helicopter seeds. The seed needs to get as far away from the parent tree as possible to stand a chance of growing into a tree itself, because it needs sunlight, and if it was to fall underneath the tree, it wouldn't get enough sunlight. The last stanza acknowledges that this separation wasn't the worst one. I have had worse partings. But there are none that has bothered him as much as this one. So there's an element of contrast that works well in this last stanza too. This little experience roughly shows what God alone could perfectly show. There's a nice counterbalance to the words roughly and perfectly, and it sets us up for the final two lines that I think work very well together in terms of sound. So syllabically, so the number of syllables in the line, the second to last line is longer than the very last one, and that gives weight to the final words. So when you hear it read aloud, it's almost as if your voice is focusing or amplifying those last words. So I'm just going to read the last stanza again. I have had worse partings, but none that so gnaws at my mind still. Perhaps it is roughly saying what God alone could perfectly show, how selfhood begins with the walking away and love is proved in the letting go. So count the syllables of the lines to see for yourself. The weight of meaning of the poem, that you prove how much you love your children by letting them grow up and form their own identities, is reinforced in the final lines. And the sound of the lines, the way they run together, creates a dramatic finish. In the first video, we looked at the poem Neutral Tones, a poem that finishes in an unsatisfactory way with an uneven sound. This poem is brought to a close in a very satisfactory way, and we could also mention the structure here too. We saw how the rhyme scheme is A, B, A, C, A, and this could reflect the father-son relationship. The father is the A line, so to speak, while the son moves away from him in the B and C lines, but importantly, he always comes back. So just as each stanza ends by rhyming with the first line. So we've spent a few minutes gathering some things to comment on there. Remember, you don't have to, and indeed I haven't, picked out everything you could talk about. The idea is to cover the bases and then find a few details that will differentiate your answer from everyone else's. I'm going to go through putting together an answer to the unseen in videos that are coming up in the future, but just finally here, let's take a look at the questions. As you can see, the first question is more prescriptive than the second, and as I said in the previous video, if you're struggling to find interesting things in the poem, then go for the first question, because it gives you more guidance on what to talk about. But the second one is broader and would allow you to talk about more challenging ideas, such as the sound and the structure that we've mentioned in this video. I hope that you found this video useful. I'm going to be doing a couple of more videos where I go through unseen poems, but if there's a poem you would like me to analyse as an unseen, let me know in the comments and I'll do my very best. Please remember to subscribe and like, and talk to you soon.